Hey everyone! I wanted to share with you one of the blog posts that I'm really proud of. I worked with mathematical models to come up with how I use math in real life, um, which is an age-old question that I think we all remember asking, and I got a lot as a TA. People were always asking me, "When am I going to use this?" And it was mostly for the upper level classes, like geotech. Um, which are quite applicable to your real life engineering jobs. So, as far as math goes, I use math. I think it's probably really rare that I use math actually in my engineering job. But I get really excited when I get to, and so I think that's probably why they give me those projects. um, so even though I'm an engineer, not a mathematician, there have been a handful of times where I sat down and I've spit out some hardcore math problems. I got excited, I geeked out, and I spent way more hours than I should have figuring out all the different scenarios. And I told everybody that I knew that I got paid to use MathCAD. For a wastewater conveyance system for a very large city in central Texas, we're scoped to create water relief structures and additional parallel pipes to transport wastewater during high flows to a wastewater treatment plant. The pipes are huge. They're 42-inch diameter pipes, and we're going to create a 60-inch parallel diameter, or 60-inch diameter parallel pipe. So one that's as tall as me, or the diameter is as tall as I am, so that during high flow demand scenarios, water will spill over into the larger pipe. And they're actually in construction for this right now. It's already gone up to bid. So with the design of the parallel interceptor, we wanted to transfer water over to that parallel pipe during at high flows, but so that during low flows it stays in the main 42-inch pipe. So we'll use something called a weir, W-E-I-R, which is a structure for which water passes over. And if you know any hydrologists, I really hope that they've used the pun weird before, and how weird the weir is, because that's like my all-time favorite pun. I use it all the time. And so basically, using gravity, water will flow over into a second or a side channel. In the case for this system, the weir is a section of two pipes that comes together. So basically, they have two pipes sitting in the ground, and the contractor cut into both of them and made a little concrete channel so that water can spill over into that second weir. And so my job as the engineer was to design how long that structure should be that water can spill over. And also we want to know the elevation of the 60-inch pipe so that water, if there's not very much water in the main 42-inch pipe, it stays in that pipe and you don't get a little bit in each pipe. Otherwise, you'll have lower flows, and if you have low flows, you can have settling of solids. So that'll release gases and smells and things you don't want to happen in a sewer system. So if you're interested, there's a super detailed write-up, a tour of one of the sewer systems in London, the Riverfleet CSO, and it looks awesome. I've posted a picture to my Instagram before, and you guys all loved it. And I love them all too, so I wish I had taken them. But it gives you a bit of an idea of how to look underground using this sewage and stormwater functionality. So our senior conveyance engineer ordered a book from the UK, all in metric units and intended for square channel irrigation side channels, so in farms in order to get water out to the farmland. And so I was tasked with taking the concept and designing how long this weir needed to be to let water spill over into the second channel. And the reason that it gets designed by engineers and not just the contractor out there and cutting a piece into the pipe is because of what I told you before. We only want it to be used during high flow events. And so it's a specialized function, an equalization weir or a stress relief weir. And the reason before, like I said, we don't want solids to settle out during low flows, and this is typically about 2 feet per second. is low flow, where you'll start to get solids to settle out, so waste, human waste, or anything you put in your toilet, I guess. We also don't want too much turbulence in the water, because it releases the hydrogen sulfide gas, and because if it creates turbulence, you're now having forces, fluid forces that are resisting the direction of flow. So in my little blog post, I put in some little graphs about what deposition looks like at low velocities. So you can go and see the little pictures of deposition and what it looks like if you've got a hydrogenous flow where there's solids just interspersed throughout the pipe and as it's flowing. And I guess I should say that there is some settling out, and so part of the preventative maintenance plan, or the PM, is to have these lines flushed out every so often, especially if they don't get a whole lot of flow and they don't get a whole lot of fast flow that can flush them out. We'll have little connections where you can go in and actually flush them out yourself. So for tasks where there's small pieces of design that need to be done, a lot of the times a senior engineer will do some back of the napkin calculations and look at the overall picture of the system to figure out where it makes sense to put in the weir. And on this particular project, there were many iterations. There is, from what I remember, A, B, C, D, D.2, D.3, E, F. I think there were several iterations of F. There was like an underpass iteration, and we had a lot of meetings with the client back and forth, like trying to figure out what's constructible, not in the middle of traffic in a huge downtown area of San Antonio, and also what makes sense cost-wise and flow-wise and hydraulic-wise with the pipes. So to look at the scale of the entire system, we'll use a computer program, which in this case was InfoWorks RS, and it does basically a lot of math calculations in the background, and then these are the fluids and the hydraulics equations, and then it'll display it on a spatial graphical view in GIS. So you'll see on the blog post there's a picture of there's like the map of all the downtown streets, and then where our pipes are and the flow, and it says diameter, max flow. We can have it display capacity. We can have it display the Darcy factor, Froude number, a whole bunch of things in the program. And then by looking at the graphs and the cross sections displayed, we can figure out where does it make sense to put this weir, where is it easiest to construct, what won't disrupt downtown traffic, and what place has the right slope for the existing pipe to support movement of water by gravity into the new pipe. Unless we're trying to put it in as a force main. Actually, it wouldn't be a weir if you had a force main, because a force main is basically a sewer pipe that's under pressure. So where is the weir needed before pressures are too high, and are there other relief structures that is not a weir that might perform better? So the design of the side weir is a little bit more finite than what you would do in the modeling program. So it has to be done by hand to make sure that it's accurate at that scale. And when I say by hand, I just mean calculations as part of a quality check to make sure we have the right length. We'll check this against the model to make sure that the pressures and the flows that we're getting in our calculations are similar than to what the simulation is getting. And some parts will take information that we've gotten from the simulation and plug it into our equations. So it pulls up these really cool graphs, and our modeler that we worked with, she had all the data that was given to us by the city from their InfoWorks model. She put it into her computer program, and things are labeled, like the manholes are labeled by all their manhole numbers. And if she wanted to add in a new manhole, she would put in a number that was close to a manhole that's already there, and then put a little exclamation point behind it. And that lets the city know that this is a new manhole that we're going to be constructing, and it doesn't quite have a name yet. So then once we're in the design process and we're coming up with the final drawings and the as-built, the city will decide what's next in their numbering scheme, or however their cataloging of manhole numbers makes sense, and they'll let us know what they want to call that manhole, and then we'll update our modeling system so that we have all the correct manhole numbers, and then present it back to the city, so the city then has an updated version of their model that describes all the hydraulics going on in their wastewater system, which is pretty typical as part of the closeout packages to hand that back to the city. So we needed to design the exact length of the side weir, which would be placed at manhole 30212 exclamation point. So I started out with many rough drawings, and in the end turned into a rough sketch that I ended up doing in like Microsoft PowerPoint, and drawing circles and little lines and arrows, because I needed something visual to keep my mind on all the variables in the equations, like the QS, the Q spill, the QU, the QF, QS required, QS model, and Q just means flow. Is typically what H&H engineers use for flow in pipes. So then I took the equations from the book that were built for that square irrigation well, and I converted them into a round pipe. Not a well, I'm sorry, an irrigation channel, and I converted it into a round pipe that's not completely full. And so I did a little bit of trig with the senior engineer, which is a bit of an anxious, stressful day, like watching him do the trig, and I was like, I had no idea I would ever be doing this in my career. Like, maybe I should have kept some of my math books instead of getting rid of them all. And then I had to convert between all the UK measurements and then put it into US customary measurements, which is why I, in the end, went to using MathCAD, because it does all the conversions for you and I don't have to worry about doing stupid mistakes. So I ended up with some equations, which you can see on my blog post, but it's not very pretty. I mean, they're just equations that are in MathCAD, and it's not a super pretty program. But yeah, they're there, and I color coded different pieces because some equations are from different books, and then the weir's submerged in this case, and the UK irrigation channel book, since it's open irrigation channels, it didn't deal with a submerged weir, and so then I had to insert some other equations to make sure that I was capturing all of that into my final answer. And for this particular method, we ended up iterating. You have to do the calculations over and over again until you can narrow down and get the flow in your equation to match the flow that you want to go through the pipe. And once you get those to match, it's basically you're changing the length of the weir until those match, and then that length that you end up with, that's the length that you'll put into your design. So basically you calibrate the equation until it spits out that desired length. And it's a little bit more complicated with these equations, because every time that you change the length, it changes a bunch of other variables, and then you have to go into a little line graph chart and say, okay, if this variable over here, so if HO over P is 1.6 and K is 1.4, that is about here on the line. And so you have these variables that are changing, and then you have to pull other variables off graphs and put those in, and then figure out what the answer is. So there's just a lot of back and forth, and I certainly didn't want to do all those calculations, putting them into a calculator every time by hand, which is why I use MathCAD. You can see a theme here. I really like MathCAD. Sometimes I'll use Excel, but it was a bit trickier with this problem, especially because of those coefficients, or the variables K and J that were changing. I could have done MATLAB or some type of writing in code, but I tend to avoid code because I know it'll take me so much longer to use than to just put into MathCAD. And MathCAD has a cool little printout that I can then attach to the back of my basis of design report. And other people can look at it on the hard copy and check it, because because it's just doing the calculations in the background and the conversions. It's not like running some code in the background that you have to know how the code works in order to figure out if it's right or wrong. And so a lot of the senior engineers, they don't know how to do the coding anyway, and so it wouldn't be helpful for me to get my answer by coding it and then handing it to them and nobody being able to QA/QC it, or if they don't review it, then they can't stamp off on it, right? And MathCAD's an easy program once you learn some of its idiosyncrasies. Like you have to use a colon in order to name a variable, and it's got some weird things that it does, but once you learn it or watch a couple of YouTube videos about it, you'll get it, and it's really easy. It's more difficult to retool an algorithm than in Excel, but I really like that you can print it out and you can hand it in to somebody and they can look at it and not be totally confused of what's happening. So I also end up putting everything into the Excel program, so then I'll put like little comments and little checks and be like, hey, if this road number is greater than 0.6, the flow is disturbed and may be unreliable. If it's greater than 1.0, then the flow is supercritical. And those are things that like the engineer should know. And they do know because they do this every day, all day. But since I don't always do hydrology or hydraulics, I probably know that too from just studying it a lot in school. But it's something that it's a simple check. It's an easy check. It should be common sense for the engineers, but I put it in there so that I don't know, so I can see it. And whenever I have that little reminder right next to the Freud equation, which is the square root of b times the original flow squared over g times the original area cubed. Because I'm sure you got that. Anyway, a long equation, and if I see the Freud number is 0.3, I can be like, oh, that is not disturbed because it's not greater than 0.6 and it's supercritical. So we're all nerds here on my channel. I know because I got this little slice of the internet where the math is okay. It's fun. It's really fun. You have a problem and you know that there's one answer. Sometimes there's one or two paths to that answer, and I really like that life can be black and white in that sort of fashion. In real life, you can't just open up your math book and flip to the last few pages and look up the answer to all the odds, or like go online and then download all of the answers to check yourself. That's kind of why I like engineering. And I sometimes explain that math is not all engineering is. I don't sit in a cubicle with my protractors and my engineering scales doing differential equations all day long, thank God. But I know them, and I know their purpose, and I know their theory, even if I'd have to pull out a lot of resources to make sure that I could actually attempt one in real life. And even then, I probably would figure out what sort of program I could use so that I avoid doing it by hand. So I would like to preface or have a little disclaimer that this is probably less than 1% of my job. Normally I'm writing reports, or I'm coordinating with everyone on the project, or sending emails out. Sometimes I'm not even in the office. I'm like hanging out in the field site watching a weir that I designed be constructed. Or like today I was sitting in meetings for a couple hours, and so I treated myself out to a site walk to see all the generators that they're putting in. And so you can see some of that on my Instagram, actually, if you head there now. So yeah, that's my little blog post on when I'm ever going to use this in real life, and hopefully it was interesting, and you can go to the links, which I'll put down below, and you can see some of the little pictures, and check out that London CSO project. It has some really cool underground tunnel pictures. So yep, that's it. I will see you guys later. Bye.